On this episode, we take you through the process of replacing a failed culvert out in beautiful Lorette, Manitoba. Our client reached out to us about having their approach replaced. Now, their approach was not very old. In fact, it was installed only 4 years prior, and at first glance, the approach looked fine. But after digging a little deeper during our consultation, we discovered what the underlying problem was: a failure with the culvert. This misfortune was caused by an improper installation. The result, the driveway approach had begun eating itself, and this ended up creating a huge hole in the middle of their approach, and every rainfall, it kept getting bigger. To solve this issue, the culvert had to come out. The first step to fix this problem is handling the paperwork, and that means getting a permit for the new approach. Property owners in rural Manitoba are able to pull their own permits, and to do this, they can contact their local permitting office directly to begin this process. Now, having a permit is very important for several reasons. Firstly, it ensures that the approach follows a minimum set of standards for installation, and this will prevent situations like this case from ever happening. These standards are also outlined on the permit. That way, your contractor knows exactly what the specs are for your approach and for the culvert to be sized correctly. Once your permit is approved, the culvert is made to order. Now, permits usually take 1 to 3 weeks for approval, and a culvert takes less than 2 weeks to make if it's not already in stock. Because we're dealing with an existing approach, we gotta rip out the old one before we can install the new culvert. And the best tool for this job is our trusty shovel, aka a mini excavator. There's a small mountain of limestone sitting behind the mini excavator. It's 3/4 down limestone. We had delivered at the start of the day. That way, trusty operator Jason isn't waiting, and more importantly, our client isn't left with an unfinished approach. We also let them know our schedule way in advance. That way, they could park on the street in case they had to go somewhere. But there is a lot of mud mixed in with the gravel as we start excavating the approach. Now, we chose to haul this material away and install a new aggregate. The reason being, we want the new approach to be sturdy and prevent any future shifting, and the new aggregate will make for a much better base once it's backfilled. Cue the digging montage. Next, we remove the existing culvert. As you can see, it's 2 separate pieces. This isn't because we cut it. This was installed this way using 2 separate sections. Typically on a normal driveway approach, we would just use 1 section of culvert. What ended up happening is the previous contractor opted to use 2 shorter sections. Now, this is fine if he had used a coupler to create a union between the 2 sections. However, there was no coupler. When a coupling is missing, what can end up happening is the 2 sections of culvert can separate. This separation can create a void, resulting in a sinkhole. Ultimately, what will happen is the material will wash down into the culvert, and this creates several problems. The first is it blocks the culvert, so you don't have proper drainage, and the second is that you have a sinkhole on your approach that gets bigger every time there's a rainfall, and this is what we were contacted to fix from our client. Now, we chose to install a single section so couplers weren't needed. Now that we've completed the excavation, the next step is installing the new culvert. Once the old culvert is out, we check elevations with our subsoil before we begin installation. That's important that the new culvert doesn't sit too low or too high above the bottom of the ditch so water can drain properly. The next step is backfilling the area. Backfill, we want to compact the base material. And these are called lifts. As we progress to the top, the final step is finishing the grade of the approach and doing a final compaction. We opt to use the skid steer to perform this as it's more efficient and it'll do a better job than the excavator. And after the final touch-ups, here are the results. Thanks guys for tuning in. Don't forget, if you haven't already, like this video and hit that subscribe button.